Hello out there. I'm the oldest nerd, and it's once again time to talk movies with Professor O. And Professor O, of course, is with us from his study in Oklahoma. I'm here in Texas, and we're going to be talking about the 7% solution. And the reason that we are is because Nicholas Meyer, who directed Time After Time, did such a nice job with that. And he did the 7% solution was something he wrote and was not directed by him, but it informed what went into Time After Time. So we thought that we would take that connection and go with it. So this is a 1977 movie. It was released in the United Kingdom in 1977, and it was filmed in Austria mostly. It has and for those of you who don't know what the title means, it's a Sherlock Holmes adventure that was not written by Arthur Conan Doyle, but written in a book by Nicholas Meyer, who directed the Time After Time, but rather was only the writer of this film. This was a film that was directed by Herbert Ross. But you can see a lot of the same touches in this film as in the previous, wouldn't you say?
That's and okay, we're getting there, and
Yeah,
Professor B is our Sherlock Holmes expert, and just as you were having the nautical expert with the when we covered the wonderful ship movie that I'm struggling with the name.
yeah, Master and Commander, yeah.
Yes, yes, and but still
And I have to say I'm no expert on that either because there was a story that they tried to put Patrick O'Brien on a sailboat and he had no idea what he was supposed to be doing there, and despite the fact that he was so specific in how ships worked in the during the Napoleonic Wars, he was one of these people who could teach it but couldn't do it.
couldn't do it. Fascinated. That way, he was an interesting author, and yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I've heard that about him. And but okay, but one question I've got: 7%. So,
Ah, yes.
what's 7%? How do we?
Okay. All right. Yeah. Essentially, among other things, Sherlock Holmes experimented with drugs.
Right.
He had studied chemistry and criminology and identification of all kind of things when he was in college, and used this 7%, 93% saline, 7% cocaine injection that
I
he
figured it was
used
something
to
like that. Yeah.
relieve the ennui. Now, in the
Ah, that's
reference
right.
of that time, this was not an illegal drug. Neither was laudanum, but this was a drug that was supposed to be kind of a pain reliever. And in
Right.
fact, Sigmund Freud, who's also in this film, used it himself. He had cancer of the jaw for his cigar smoking and used actually cocaine himself in order to relieve the pain on that until later in his career, he decided that drug use was a bad thing and quit using any kind of pain relief and
Ooh.
suffered badly through his last few months of cancer. But
Oh God.
that's the real Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
In this one, Alan Arkin is kind of a drug counselor as Sigmund Freud, and we have, of course, Nicole Williamson, who was fairly unknown, cast as Sherlock Holmes in this, but the acting
Apparently a
job that
great
he, I
apparently
think
a
so.
great theater actor. You knew him if you were in the
Yes,
theater. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The British theater, of course. I mean,
Right, I
it's
didn't
hardly.
know him. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, he is
and
certainly unknown in the movies, and but he did take this part to a point that I've never seen Holmes played as very tightly wound, brilliant, but just all over the place all at once, and Watson as being much more ponderous, and the thing that I like about this movie, and I want to get right to this, is the
Honduras,
fact that
right, yeah,
in
that's
my readings of the book. Uh, Watson, in A Study in Scarlet, which was the first Holmes book, talks about his experience upon leaving. There was a war in Afghanistan at that time in the 1880s. and he has just returned from the war. He is wounded, which causes him to walk with a limp, and he describes himself as old and washed up. And the fact of the matter is, if he's just been a doctor in the war, he couldn't be any older than Holmes is. And yet, in most of the movies, and Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce looked to be about 40 years older than Holmes. And he plays a doddering old man. And in just about every movie treatment I've seen before this film, Holmes was always the young, brilliant, and Watson was kind of the dull-witted old codger. And it never was really that way in the books. In fact, we believe that that Watson probably was as close to an intellectual match for Holmes as anybody, which is probably why Holmes liked him at all.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
why they get along. Yeah,
Yeah.
that completely makes sense. But so the movies portray it differently, but that's the backstory is fascinating too because really, and you're right. So I'm thinking this film matches them up better than most films do. With
I think so.
matches them better, intellectual equals. And then that reference to. But this makes more sense now because because as a coming at this more as a novice, where my background with Sherlock Holmes is a Star Trek episode with Moriarty, and Data playing Sherlock Holmes is as close to authentic as I get. And so there's my backstory. So and Watson was Geordi in that episode, but we really don't. But back to the books. So they're intellectual equals, but they have the backstory of Watson being injured in Afghanistan, because really you don't even see him limping too much. Maybe just a little bit of a gait in this film that's it's a little bit slower. But then so it kind of doesn't make sense when Holmes comes at him and basically says, it calls him a cripple at a certain point in the film, and then apologizes profusely. But now we know what that's for. As a viewer, I'm going, where did that come from? Now that makes more sense.
Yeah,
the injury in Afghanistan.
There are a number of references to various books. For instance, Watson's wife was in, I believe, The Sign of the Four is when Watson gets married. The first book and some of the short stories, Watson and Holmes roomed together. And the reason they got together was because Holmes didn't have quite enough money in his trust fund to have the apartment all on his own. And Watson, just coming back from the war, had not set up a practice in London yet and needed some place where he could stay. And so a friend of his referred him to Holmes, thinking it would be somebody he could get along with. And so he goes to a university science lab where they meet. And that's how they first get together. And they room together because they seem to have habits that are not averse to the other. And it's only later that Holmes decides that Watson should come with him, come with me, and then Watson becomes his kind of biographer. But after The Sign of Four, he meets the femme fatale of that story and marries her, and she's referred to after that as Mrs. Watson. And so that's played here by Samantha Eggar.
How did you feel about her as and this, we're just scratching the surface here with it. How did you feel about her casting as connected to the books? Did you feel like that worked?
She was kind of sketchy. Obviously her character was developed during the thing, but she was basically a woman in peril, and so that was that, and she has very little screen time in this film, so there's not much to say. It's a shame. She's a great actress, and probably became a bigger actress after this film. Maybe not because of this film, but certainly later on she became more of a household name. Anyway.
No, I was just going to say one podcast had mentioned they do the intellectual property. They kind of look at several every a bunch of Holmes stuff, and they mentioned at least she didn't scream, and but in the back of my mind, that somehow maybe she was in a horror movie, Samantha Eggar. I need to look that up and see what they were referencing. But and then there's Vanessa Redgrave, who was
Lola Devereaux, And
Yeah.
that is a character I don't believe that it existed in the Holmes canon, but they do
Ah,
make reference in the film where they show the snake that was in the Speckled Band. They mention of course Mrs. Watson, which was in a previous story. And the whole film takes part after the one story about Moriarty, and that's when Moriarty and Holmes go over a cliff and is assumed dead. And so this was supposedly what generated that story, because at the end, uh, uh, Holmes tells Watson, "Tell him I died fighting with my math tutor."
that okay. So that this leads to a series of questions I had for you.
Okay.
And the name of this story, where I didn't realize they both died. It's a short story called Something Falls.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
uh, not Bedford Falls. That's
No.
yeah. But anyway, uh, but you gather it's a yeah the waterfall, and so they both go off the waterfall,
Yes.
and Moriarty dies, but and does it take 3 years for Holmes to resurface? Was it a 3 year
Yes,
absence?
and that was not. It was a plan to kill off the character. Arthur Conan Doyle wanted to be a poet. He was a bad poet. He couldn't sell any poetry. All he could sell was Holmes stories, and the magazine he wrote for wanted more Holmes stories. A lot of what he did was short stories before he wrote novels, and so he hated Sherlock Holmes. And if you look at except for the description of the characterizations and all of this, and the world that he built of Baker Street and London and Paddington Station and Victoria Station and Brixton Road and all of the places where they went, the actual mysteries weren't that much. But I mean, it was such a rich characterization, such a complete world that he built, that's what makes those stories great.
Fascinating.
And
So the mysteries were,
so
in some respects, fairly easily solved, but the
yeah,
world itself was what was bringing people in.
that's it, and
It-
it was just compelling characters, and so but like I said, Conan Doyle was not happy with that idea. He wanted to be Robert Browning. He didn't want to be, Agatha Christie.
as I'm taking everything to Star Trek today with the comparison, where Moriarty being in the Trek episode, and by the way, that was the second season Star Trek episode, and at that point I thought, this show might make it. The first season of Next Generation did not prove to me that much was there.
It's true.
I wanted to like it, but that second season episode with Moriarty was fantastic, and I thought this could work. But so anyway, sticking with it reminds me, if I had
Well,
written
they
a
got in
story
trouble.
about
They got in trouble with not the foundation, but the estate of Arthur Conan Doyle, which the
ah,
copyrights were not out at the time that they did Elementary Dear Data,
oh my
and
goodness.
they got sued by the Arthur Conan Doyle estate. And so that's when they came up with the idea of Dixon Hill, which was a better idea, which was an original idea.
Yeah, an original idea. That's amazing. Well, but it reminds me, for some reason I was thinking Star Trek, and I thought, what if I got stuck? Not one of my favorite characters. He can be a fascinating character, but Data's brother. Every time they kill off Lore, I'm going, fine, that is fine. I do not need to see Lore ever
Yeah.
again. And he's just evil. And we were talking about Picard before the show, and in the third season when they kind of bring him back, that's the one time I'm like, oh God, not again. But anyway, it'd be like having stuck writing Lore stories. Oh, they love Lore, they want more Lore, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna kill him off. But so I kind of, you can understand how Arthur, but still, what a character, a wonderful character, and he had to keep him alive for sure. But he wants to kill him off, so off they go. He's just going to kill off the entire franchise. The Napoleon evil and Holmes die
Yeah.
on these in this waterfall,
And that
and
was
it's
really the only time they used Moriarty in the books and the stories, and somehow the movies picked up as if he was behind everything, because I guess they just needed a regular bad guy. But
that
that was
confuses me. I still, when I was doing some background on this of Moriarty in one book, I just refused to believe that. I said, no, he's bad. He's got to be all over the place.
mm-mm.
Just one, and that was it. Well, that's amazing. The movies picked up on that for sure.
They
Is
did.
is is that because in the books there's there's not a persistent evil person
No.
that movies always need? Movies have got to have that antagonist all the time, and is that you think that's one
Well,
of the
well,
reasons?
there's one story, the Red Haired League, where there are it's an odd thing going on that there are a number of red haired people who are brought to this place to copy off the Encyclopedia Britannica. And there's a great mystery of it, and somebody hires Holmes to find out what's going on. And it was really just some nut who wanted redheaded people to copy the encyclopedia. There really wasn't any crime behind any of it, and so some of the stories are just kind of whimsical.
But that speaks to the quirky world building you were talking about,
Yeah,
and people can really enjoy that. And that's hilarious. Do you think that had to that and as you bring more backstory to this for us, um, Professor B, I'm starting to see Nicholas Meyer, who's a huge fan. This is really fan fiction, is what it is.
it is.
This is he's a huge fan writing something that can fit in between the canonical stuff. How can I work this in
Right.
and write a book? And do you think the redheads in the film had to do with the redheads in that
Probably. He did a lot of little things that call back to other
right?
stories, and in fact, in Holmes' Nightmares, they are previous stories that were actually written. So
Oh,
they have as the tagline on this movie that let's see, everything is true except for the facts.
exactly, exactly. And to tell you the truth, that movie was made for now, with in terms of news versus fake news. I
I
thought,
guess so.
well, in fact, is it didn't. I thought, well, that's is that. I think that's supposed to be unusual, but it's a great line. Oh, the credits were fantastic. The starting out like a book because.
Yes. Well,
And
well,
do the
speaking.
books start off like that with the picture? Is that a common thing in the book to have a drawing in the Sherlock Holmes books, like we had a drawing of the character and then a little bio about them?
I wouldn't be surprised. There's so many printings of these books, you never know what you're going to
Right.
get. There is an illustrated Sherlock Holmes, which has some of the original illustrations that were used in the Strand magazine, which they did have with all the short stories.
Ah,
And then one thing that I read, and I've yet to find a copy of it again, was the annotated Sherlock Holmes, and it had all the stories together. It was a huge volume, and the pages were only three-quarter, and the other quarter of the page was footnotes, and all of it talking about things of whether these were actual characters, that Arthur Conan Doyle was actually Dr. Watson, and he was writing about Holmes.
ah,
And so there are a lot of, to this day, a lot of people that believe that they were actual historical figures.
historical figures, and that he did put into with his powers of observation and world building. He just folded them in.
And something that you didn't ask but almost did was the interim between that time that
Oh yeah,
after Holmes
20 years.
supposedly died,
Right.
the stories that finally came out were Watson reminiscing back when he lived with Holmes, and so there were more stories based on things that happened earlier. And
Fascinating.
just about all of their episodes too, all of their stories, they would refer to other things that most of them were never written about.
That,
That you
that's
remembered Watson, the affair with the train, and they would make mention of that and never really fill that in.
and that's another
So they
throwback.
use that as a way of kind of saying, yeah, there were other adventures too, and here they are. And so then they found some way that they could bring Holmes back into the present day, but there were several stories that were just reminiscences by Watson.
And you know what? And I think the movie alludes to that too, because something happens in the movie in this where it's current time, and now because basically from the beginning of the movie, Holmes is already back at the beginning of this film, but in the but it seems like in and out, not quite himself for 4 months for sure. And we know what's been going on in those 4 months in the movie is he's getting increasingly addicted after he returned.
Yeah.
But Holmes Watson mentioned something, and he said, "Oh, I may write that up as a story later on." Kind of just what you were talking
Yes,
about,
same
and
thing
alluding to
happened in
things.
most of
Yeah.
the stories. Yeah, that they refer to other stories or other things that perhaps Watson wasn't invited in on.
So
But yeah,
the book, the actual book where Holmes comes back, has got to be a landmark book. I mean, all of a sudden the readers, and it must
yes.
have, when the publisher said you got to bring it back, he brings it back. Arthur Conan Doyle brings it back. So what was the book where he comes back?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember now. I
That
don't have the. I don't think I ever read them in order. And
and the movie, does the movie explain? I'm trying to think how Holmes explained. Well, you thought I was dead. I'm not. Is it ever clear? I
well,
researched.
yeah, he is going to go and with his violin and play under the name of Segerson. Segerson, by the way,
That's
is
right.
an alias he used in several of his stories when he needed to
Oh,
be.
okay, okay.
If he would be known as Sherlock Holmes, he would call himself Holmes Segerson. And so
Yeah,
they use that in there too. You may read of a violinist known as Segerson. And he said, well,
right.
what do I tell our readers? And he said, well, tell them that I was murdered by my mathematics tutor.
There you
And that
go.
was the end of the film. And so that was supposedly the whole Moriarty story was made up, which of course it
Wow.
was, but I mean, it was a different made up.
Right. Right. Wow.
They
So
were so real characters that people might believe that even, that
exactly
was one of the kind of things. Maybe this story about him going over the falls with Moriarty was made up.
was made up. Wow. So, obviously violin case. I'm thinking, and the violin. So Holmes is and again, I'm coming. Yeah.
Yes, he can play the violin. This was one of the things Watson was very specific upon first moving in with Holmes, of the fact that he knew very little of politics, he knew very little of geography, he knew very little of anything in the world that did not specifically work as as a detective. He could
Right.
identify
Wow.
1,000 different types of tobacco. He knew all about criminology and the chemistry behind it, but very little on anything else. And so he found that kind of interesting. Also, that he had a violin which he could play very well, but most of the time he was just scraping it while he was thinking about something else.
That's wow. Which that's it's
But that
funny
was
'cause
also that was all in A Study in Scarlet, and Watson. It establishes Watson is no dummy. He's got Holmes pretty much pigeonholed from the first couple of chapters.
wow.
And
Wow.
then when they go out on it, and of course he is amazed at his ability as detective, and they've used that in the movies to say, well, he was just so stupid he thought that this guy was a genius. But the fact was that he was a smart guy that thought this guy was a genius.
Exactly. Exactly. You would take a smart guy to realize, look at those
Yeah,
connections being made. Yeah. And we need somebody, basically we need somebody, he's got to explain things to somebody so everybody else can figure out what's
yeah. In the movies,
how his mind is working.
in the movies, Holmes would put on a rubber mask, and Holmes would say, "Oh, what stranger are you?" And that never happened in the books.
Yeah. Wow. The movies. So this your favorite Holmes in all the films, Robert Duvall?
Well, Watson, yeah. Well,
No, Watson, right, right.
Robert Duvall. We have British followers here. I'm sorry. The Robert Duvall could not do a proper English accent if his life depended on it. What I liked about his performance was that he played someone who was about Holmes' age and intelligence, and that was the first time that was done. Now later they did have, I understand, Jeremy Brett, who played Watson in the BBC series, and that came later, and of course, Benedict Cumberbatch's Holmes and Watson were once again about the same age. And so, although put in the present time, redoing some of the original stories, just transposing them to modern times, which I thought was always a very good touch. And
Right.
I loved a thing where his brother Mycroft is talking to him, and Holmes at one point says, I for a long time I thought I was an idiot, and Mycroft says, we all thought you were an idiot until we met other children.
That's quite. And there's a good reversal on that.
Yeah.
Apparently with Robert Duvall, you're right. That was a big question with getting with Nicholas Meyer written the book, and so Herbert Ross says and brings him in so many times. You've got the author of the book or the screenwriter. A lot of times, sometimes don't come on the set. I don't want to hear your thoughts. But Herbert Ross was a very confident director, liked to
Yes.
assimilate other, especially we got the writer of the book. I want this guy.
It was kind of his trademark. He was a writer's director, and in which he didn't really want to inject himself into a film at all. And there was only one about dancing, because he was a former dancer, in which he actually put an interpretation in. But other than that, he basically stuck to the written part of it and showed the actors where to stand, and that was all he needed to do in this film, certainly.
Well, when they're casting Robert Duvall, they were concerned about the English accent.
Yes.
And so for his audition, Robert Duvall came in. He was also auditioning for another part, and it was so different than Sherlock, than Watson, so different. And so he comes in dressed as the other part. Almost, it was so extreme. It'd be almost like Marty Feldman auditioning for Igor in Young Frankenstein. I mean, it was he comes in dressed completely. He's not dressed as Watson, doesn't do a Watson at all, and leaves. And Nicholas Meyer and Herbert Ross look at each other and go, "What was that?"
Yeah.
What he did was he left a cassette tape, and on the cassette tape, it's Robert Duvall. Then that was his audition. He left the cassette tape, assuming they'd play it. And they did, and it was Robert Duvall doing the best English accent he could as Watson. So they listened to that. They played it. Finally, they played it for a woman in London, I think over the phone, because they're trying to determine, does this work? Let's get a Londoner. And so they played it for her, and she said, "Oh, well, this person's from North London." and that was good enough. And Robert Duvall, but that is a crazy story, the craziest audition story I've ever heard. But apparently his accent ended up passing muster. What were we talking about too with I know one thing that you mentioned, that one thing that Nicholas Meyer, in looking back on the film, he thinks it's too wordy, and there is a lot of chatter in the film. There's a lot of talking, and he says, as a director, I learned that to the language, that film is more of a visual language. I came at this as from an author, written this book, this fan fiction book that takes off on the New York Times bestseller list for months. They turn it into a movie, but he's, words were his parlance. And so he learns as part of what he thought he was a failing of the movie, but and I don't think it is, but there's a lot of words. And this comes to the end. The illustration, he said, where I'd really change what I would do is when it's when is it Freud that folds his hand? No, it's Sherlock Holmes folds his hand in the last scene of the movie, puts his hands together like this, and then it's either him or Freud, I can't remember which character, puts his hands together and he explains, this is what you've just seen. I think it's Sigmund Freud explaining the motivations. Now we know, yes, it's because Holmes has been hypnotized, he's knocked out.
Yeah.
And Freud is saying, this is how Moriarty affected this.
We know why he has this problem with Moriarty. We know why he doesn't trust women. We know why he became a detective.
And exactly. And Meyer said, if I did that again, I would not have the speech at all. I would have him fold his hands and let that speak. Let that speak. And then the viewer sees the hands like this and goes, how do you feel about that? I didn't mind the little speech, but I
really didn't. I didn't mind the narration in Blade Runner, although they say that was the worst part of it. So, I don't mind being read to. Some people have an aversion of being read to. And I think
Right.
that's one of the things. So here for people who hate to be read to, I have a line that I love, and this is uh, you find in just about every Holmes story of one way or another. Uh, the meeting of Freud. Freud says, uh, he says, "Who are you?" And Freud says, "Who am I that your friend should wish us to meet?" He says, "Beyond the fact that you're a brilliant Jewish physician who was born in Hungary and studied for a while in Paris, and that certain radical theories of yours have alienated the respectable medical community so that you have served your connections with various hospitals and branches of the medical fraternity. Beyond this, I can deduce little. You're married with a child of 5. You enjoy Shakespeare and possess a sense of honor." And those kind of things are all through the book. He just
Yes.
rattles off that kind of thing. And generally speaking, is not interested in explaining why. And he tells Watson at one time, it's more difficult to explain how I came to this than the fact that I came to this.
And that comes out in just that exchange you were talking about in Freud's office. That comes out because Alan Arkin, as Freud, says, "Okay, fine. You know all these facts about me. Why did I do these things?" And so he's
Or
trying to
yeah,
get into that.
how did you guess this with such accuracy? Freud says, and he says, "I never guess. It's an appalling habit." And that's another um, line that's used over and over in the books and the stories. But he then explains where all of this came from. He says, "Now, very well, when a man collects books on a subject, they're usually grouped together. But notice your King James Bible, your Book of Mormon, and Koran are separate, across the room, in fact, from your Hebrew Bible and Talmud, which sits on your desk. Now, these books have a special importance for you, not connected with a general study of religion. Obviously, the 9-branch candelabra on your desk confirms my suspicion that you are of the Jewish faith. It is called a menorah, is it not?" Yeah. That you studied medicine in Paris is to be inferred from the great number of medical texts in that language. Where else would a German use French textbooks but in France? And who but a brilliant German can understand the complexities of medicine in a foreign tongue? That you're fond of Shakespeare is to be deduced from this book, which is lying face downwards. The fact that you have adjusted the volume suggests to my mind that you no doubt intended referring to it again in the near future. Not my favorite play. The absence of dust is evident when I observe you maintain a consulting room. That you're a physician is evident when I observe you maintain a consulting room. Your separation from various societies is indicated by these blank spaces surrounding your diploma, clearly used at one time to display additional certificates. Now, what can it be that forces a man to remove these testimonials to his success? Why, only that he has ceased to affiliate himself with these various societies and hospitals and so forth, and why do this, having once troubled to join them at all? It is possible that it became disenchanted with one or two of them, but not likely that his disillusionment extended to all. Rather, I postulate it is they who become disenchanted with you, doctor, and ask you to resign from all of them. Why, I have no idea, but some position you've taken, evidently a medical one, has discredited you in their eyes. I take the liberty of inferring a theory of some sort too radical or shocking to gain ready acceptance in current medical thinking. Your wedding ring tells me of your marriage. Your Balkanized accent hints Hungary or Moravia. The toy soldier on the floor here ought, I think, to belong to a small boy of 5. Have I
Picks up
omitted
the toys.
anything of
Yeah.
important? Yeah. And finally, my sense of honor. He says, "Oh, it's implied by the fact that you've removed the plaques from the societies to which you no longer belong. In the privacy of your study, only you would know the difference." It's perfect, Holmes.
Just so which speaks, and that's got to be straight from Nicholas Myers's book at that point. That's
Oh
just
yeah, it has to
lifted.
be. It has to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did a fantastic job at doing it. And you're right. It's funny thinking of that. That is a boy. That's a lot of. Alan Arkin was perfect for that.
Yeah.
And he is one thing that podcast mission, and it really makes you think. You can see Alan Arkin thinking with his eyes. I mean, he just you can tell as it's happening, he's figuring things out.
Yes.
And so as I, as Sherlock Holmes is giving that incredible, brilliant exposition about who Freud is, you can see all of that really, just clicking in place in Alan Arkin's eyes. And of course,
Yes.
when it's brilliantly done, and that's where, and so in some respects, with due respect to Nicholas Meyer, a Holmes book is going to be talky because that's how we learn how he thinks, and
Yes.
and but at the same time, we're also watching really good cinematography because we're watching all of those objects, as he's talking. Where we see the three Bibles, and the part, some of them are across the room with the toy soldiers picked up. And what play do you think he says not my favorite play? Now that could have been a Shakespearean play. I'm also thinking it's Oedipus Rex. That it could that maybe
Who knows?
that Freud had been reading, but I think it's implied it's Shakespeare. But
Yeah.
but yes, Sophocles wrote Oedipus Rex.
Yeah. So thank you for that
But I don't
clarification,
know.
Professor.
I still think it could be. It just would fit so well.
Yeah.
But that was a great scene and a great way. And really, this movie does such a good job with Watson, which and not having known that background, I'm glad that it feels like maybe in media we're getting Watson maybe is getting his due now.
Yes,
Because
I think so.
yeah, there's the new show on CBS. I think it's called Watson. And it's about a doctor
Mhm.
whose name is Watson, and
Yeah.
he's played as a brilliant physician.
Now,
So I think,
interestingly, Arthur Conan Doyle got the idea for Sherlock Holmes. Doyle originally was a doctor. He was trained as a doctor, and as a physician, and he had a mentor at university who you could walk into the room and he could diagnose you before you had said anything, and so that's what he based Holmes on.
that's what he based on. Yeah.
Yes,
And you could, and that was common in this film, which well, you're looking a little pallid, or
yeah.
looking, that was, and I thought, it makes you think of the powers of observation. I think how often do we put our own thoughts and feelings aside and actually look at somebody and assess
it is a
how
part
they
of
may be
medicine.
doing.
It is a part of medicine to this day. These days, when you go to the doctor, you get you can see all of his notes. They send you online all of the progress notes and things like that they write up. And I am still a little amazed at how much my doctor takes in when he just comes in and says hello and we're going to adjust your medications, or your heart sounds fine, or things like this. But he has a whole lineup on how I present myself, how my mood, my ability to put my thoughts in order, what my knowledge base is, and stuff like that he does by a very brief encounter.
Wow, that's yeah, exactly. Excellent observation. That's the kind of physician you want. That's exactly right. And it's brilliant that Arthur Conan Doyle brings that to really to Holmes, and then it still reminds me of that when the words for that scene, the notes for that scene, and all the scenes where they're together. They're a terrific team. The three of them. I would love to see an additional story with Freud also involved. Maybe they go back to Austria, because the three minds together were fantastic. And then to think, it's funny. You follow the book. I'm following, not the book, the film. I follow it so closely, but it's only now you take a step back and we just watched a scene where Freud plays tennis on a question of honor, almost like a duel. It's a tennis match with a with an Austrian guy,
which is an interesting thing, because they had established that, and this was put up in the Robert Downey version of Holmes, that he was somewhat of an athlete himself, and a good swordsman, and a good tennis player. And so it's interesting they put Freud there instead of Holmes. That was, I think, for the purpose of the story, they did that. But it was interesting along that line. And of course, that Watson was somewhat of a gambler, although they only mention it the briefest point in a couple of the books. And they picked up on that in the Robert Downey version of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, that's right. And they said they offered him the chance to place a bet in this film too, and he declined.
Right.
That's it. And I wonder if the old tennis courts, because they're playing off the walls. It's like racquetball. They're playing off
This was an actual tennis court from in Kensington, West London, which has been there since Edwardian times. So that was actually how the tennis courts looked at that time. They had the walls and the angles where they hit the wall and roll off the a bevel and things like that. So
Right.
the game has changed a little to
I
modern
love
day
that. The
to
bevel
modern day
stuff.
Wimbledon. Yeah,
And of course that came up because of the, and that's funny. I did read Nicholas Meyer long interview. His least favorite place to film was in Austria.
yeah,
He points out that it's Austria 1976. Austria, he said in his words, Austria liked to pretend that they were, or like to say that they, not pretend, they were this first victim of Hitler. But
yeah.
Nicholas Meyer said, well, back in 1938, they were kind of one of the few willing victims. They kind of some Austrians welcomed Anschluss, or welcomed Hitler coming,
Yeah,
and he said some of that feeling was still there. And in 1976, so of course but of course this film is set, before World War One, and yeah, but still the question of Freud being Jewish comes up, and that led to the point of honor, that basically led to the tennis match instead of a duel, because the German was very prejudiced against Freud, and Freud was standing up for himself. Bottom line, he's standing up for himself, and it's expressed in a tennis match, which is
right.
just amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of like that. It kind of went off the rails, and pun is intended. When they get to the railroad scene, they never had action things in the Holmes pictures. It was, I mean, the Holmes stories. It was all what we would call procedural these days,
Right.
and so I think that he needed to have something that moved, and so they decided to have this race between two trains, and Watson's revolver, which was something that I always found interesting in the books. Holmes was so brilliant, but he never remembered if Watson had a gun. He would say, in this one, it just says, make preparations, and Watson throws his gun in the suitcase. But
That's right. His wife said,
usually he would just say to Watson, are you armed? And he says, well, I have my service revolver. And it's the same line through, a dozen books, that he does never seem to remember that, yeah, Watson has a gun, and it's the one he used in the service. So, and they used an authentic one in this picture, where it would have dated back to the time of the Afghanistan wars there.
gotcha.
It was, I forget what it was called. It was it's something that they still, I mean, the brand is still made. It's,
The duel of the Oh, that's still made. The gun is still made.
yeah, yeah. And as soon as I look for it, it'll disappear, but I'll get to it later.
I love Jeremy Kemp. We talked about that, playing the Austrian character who has uh, gotten involved with a gambling debt, and to solve the gambling debt, he's going to kidnap the woman who's actually in love with him, but he's going to kidnap that woman and Vanessa Redgrave and turn her over to the wealthy Turk that has that from which he's incurred this gambling debt. That Jeremy Camp had the gambling debt, so he's going to turn the woman over to him. And so basically they're fighting, they're rescuing the woman on this train. Apparently the trains were in Wales,
Yeah,
and they were maintained. It's like this Welsh community of railroad engineers, retired railroad engineers,
yeah.
that maintain 16 miles worth of track and multiple trains, and a lot of movies have been shot there. I think the
Yeah, the only problem is those trains weren't used in Austria. Those were English trains, and there's some
ah,
people who are saying it's not the right kind of train. But
ah,
still, I mean, it was, if you're going to believe the fact that Holmes did a train chase, you might as well not worry
yeah,
about what kind of
it's a
train it
train
was.
chase.
By the way, Watson's revolver appears to be a Webley RIC number one.
ah, and that's accurate, and
That
they
is
got that
that
right.
that would
Yeah.
be that would they never described it in the books, but it would be accurate to that time period. So
And Jeremy Kemp. I just it had making sure we don't leave him there. That face, as soon as I saw that face, is so recognizable, and he's played
Yeah,
Nazis. He's got such a visage and a presence in a film. And so he had
yeah,
played Picard's brother famously in another awesome episode after the Locutus of Borg 2-part episode. Then Star Trek Next Generation did something that Trek had never done before, is psychologically dealing with a character, the captain, who might have been broken by the things he had seen. Kirk could go through anything and they'd never
yeah.
deal with any psychological effects. Here, Picard goes back to France. He's kind of broken. And what he needs to be belted by his brother, get into a fight in the mud with his brother. And Jeremy Kemp plays his brother and did a great job. And then he also played a Nazi in Top Secret, the first
Yeah.
Val Kilmer's first film, and made by the makers of Airplane, and you'll never forget.
Some people do get typecast, but in his case, it seems to have led him to more work rather than less. So that's a good thing, I guess.
It's a good thing, and I always like what he brings to
They
the
say
part.
if you're going to be a supporting actor, you'll work forever. If you're a star, your time is runs out quickly.
Well, and that speaks to the actor that played Sherlock Holmes. I really had trouble conjuring him up, but again, he in the world of in the theater world, well known. Apparently, a little bit hard to get along with.
Interesting though.
Volatile.
He was a supporting character in this film, even though he's the main character in the book. Really, Freud is the main character, and Watson kind of with him, and so and of course. They Laurence Olivier was in this in a bit
Oh
part.
my goodness,
I mean,
Olivier.
he's
Yeah.
of course Moriarty, and we don't see much of him. And he's just a mild mannered mathematics professor who seems to be scared of Holmes trying to kill him or something. And
Well,
so
was he actually? And it's Laurence Olivier, which just is incredible. I think he'd recently what did he play? He played the evil dentist.
in
As the
Marathon Man, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Just like the
He was
year
also
before.
he was also in a terrible picture called The Betsy. If
Oh,
he and Robert Duvall and I forget who the main character was in this. At any rate, it should have been
yeah.
just a TV movie
It
with a
was a
nude scene.
TV
I
movie
think,
on film. That's exact. I was a
yeah,
film projectionist for that film, and it was pretty bad.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Only the two of us would know that film. So
Yeah, and I think it was written by in Star Trek 4, which gets us to Nicholas Meyer again, who wrote Star
yeah,
Trek 4. Um, the when Spock is talking about the brilliant literature that's coming out of the 80s, and he mentions the author of the Betsy. What is he? He said
well, Jacqueline Susani mentions that, wasn't it? And the other one was oh shoot,
Harold Robbins.
Harold Robbins.
Harold
That's
Robbins.
it. Ah, yes, the Masters.
The greats. the greats.
Yeah.
That's Nicholas Meyer has got his stamp everywhere. I mean,
He
he
does.
made that comment when you think about it. Maybe he'd seen the Betsy and decided,
Maybe so.
oh, whoa. Nicholas, I have just,
By the way, we don't recommend the Betsy. It's about
no,
people fighting for supremacy at a car manufacturer.
car manufacturing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The Betsy's the name of a car that's supposed to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Supposed to
I think
revolutionize the car business. It's basically Dallas without Larry Hagman.
I think what they did was they got a Ford Pinto and kind of dressed it up, because the Betsy was going to
Pretty
be
much.
an economic.
Yeah.
I've always got to bring us back to Pinto. So I had.
I drove a Pinto and lived through it.
They lived through. You were not hit from behind by a German tank as happened in Top Secret.
No. I was hit from the side by a 65 Impala, and there really wasn't much left of this Pinto except for me and a play school castle I had bought for my nephew for Christmas.
That was. You got hit by the supernatural car.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It was white though, and but it mashed the car in about half,
Oh,
I was sitting on top of the box that had the Play School Castle in it, and the upon getting home and opening it up, it was in perfect shape, and I thought, these are the best toys to ever buy. If I can't break it by falling on it during an accident, my nephew can't tear it up, and
you
he didn't.
can't. The Play School Castle is going to
That's
live
it.
too.
That's it.
With it, just for viewers' references, in Top Secret, there's a German tank that is causing all sorts of mayhem, and the only thing that they fear is all of a sudden their brakes are gone. The tank crew sees, and they look up and see through the little hole in the tank. They see a Ford Pinto, and they run into it, and everything blows up. And
Yeah.
that's the and Jeremy Kemp is in that film. So I had a couple of. I think you've answered almost all the questions I had. Let's see. So we find out kind of how in this film, I want, and it makes you wonder if Nicholas Meyer was. We find out how Holmes became driven to find justice. How is that part of? I mean, certainly we see
No,
this at the. So that's maybe something in the fan fiction here that Nicholas Meyer's
that's
answering.
pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, that his God, and of course we spoil things in the plot, but at the end of the film, it's the only other scene you see Laurence Olivier in, which is kind of
Yeah.
amazing. They de-aged
Really
him
is.
before they had de-aging technology by about 40 years,
Well,
and
they
he's
yeah they did a what did they do? They put Vaseline on the lens.
yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly right. De-age the lens instead of the
I'm told they did that with Elizabeth Taylor in the White Diamonds commercials.
right, right. That's exactly right. So they all so they de-age, and so yes, he's Moriarty. The math teacher is in bed with Sherlock Holmes's mother, and
Yeah.
of course, and that wow, that's a that would be Oedipus. Speaking of Freud and the Oedipus complex, there you'd have you basically, according to Freud, for a young boy, like, well, especially it's younger, but it's like 2.5, 3, even 4, maybe even not much older. But the mother, of course, is the first love object, and the father is a rival for attention. So then there she is being surrendered to the math teacher, and then the other rival, the psychological rival, according to Freud, would be the father, and the father ends up shooting the mother, which is just psychological
Yeah.
damage would be unbelievable. And so I think that's what, at the end of the day, that leads to this cocaine addiction too, and also the fact that he seeks to that that Holmes seeks to right wrongs, to find
Yeah.
justice
Yeah.
and right wrongs.
But
But
then, of
definitely,
course, most of Freud's theories were disproven uh, shortly after his death. So we don't know if this
but
really counts or
movies,
not.
they're perfect for movies. They are
Yeah.
perfect motivations for
Yeah.
films. I
Yeah.
mean, you see them in film all the time. That's
Speaking of that, speaking of which, there are a number of films that were made during this era that were Sherlock Holmes for some reason. This was made in 1976. The Hound of the Baskervilles was made in 1978. The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes in 1970. The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother, 1975. That was with shoot, Young Frankenstein.
oh, Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was an awful film, by the way. And
Shoot.
let's see, the Return of the World's Greatest Detective. That's the same year, and even It's a Mystery, Charlie Brown. That Without a Clue in 1988. That goes a little too far forward, but The Strange Case of the End of Civilization as We Know It in 1977. There was a glut of Sherlock Holmes material at the time, and may have had something to do with the fact this film didn't do as well as it might have done.
Right.
It was made for about $5 million, and I think it barely made its money.
Yeah, that's exactly, strangely, and it received a mixed critical reaction review. Ebert's partner, Siskel, loved it.
Yeah.
Pauline Kael loved it.
But
But
they were
then
about the only majors that did. Everybody else
exactly,
criticized Robert Duvall in and out for his bad accent and
and it was
kind
not
of a
that bad
wooden
at all.
acting. And I don't think it was that bad.
No, it's serviceable. It works fine. And if you're there's so much going on cognitively in this movie, which brilliant work of fan fiction that's making sense. I mean, to go back and retroactively mine more material, dig motivations for why Holmes is the way he is. With Sigmund Freud, you should be thinking about that. And
Yeah.
a tennis match with Sigmund Freud, for crying out loud. The action should be the least of your concern. The So you've answered almost all questions. So why is Holmes missing? For 3 years we find that out. We find we does it does do we get an explanation of what he did in those 3 years a little bit, or is that not ever brought
The,
up?
I believe in the following book, there were some short stories that came out where Watson is going back to when he was on Baker Street. But the book that actually reveals what happened does come. They explain it. I think it was something like that. Moriarty actually went on the cliff and he caught a limb or something. I don't remember exactly how they resolved that. Wasn't his best
Well,
story.
the other question I have is in the one book about Moriarty that okay, right, that it caught a limb and yeah, and then kind of it goes back into what happened in those 3 years. In in the in the book about Moriarty, is he really a villain or is he always been? Was his act of villainy? Well, I guess this is extrapolated, with the mother, but still, what was it? Did he was he a villain in the one book?
Moriarty was actually a villain.
Ah,
He was actually culpable of this, and Holmes knew about it. But the idea that they almost wink at this when they make the film, that it seems odd that this is one of the most notorious villains of its time. And I think what they're pointing out is that so many other movies use Moriarty everywhere when
ah,
he was a villain in one story and that was it.
and that was it. And he
Yeah.
really was villainous. Um, what do you think happens at the end? So we've jumped around the movie like crazy. In terms of you just have to have watched it. What do you think happens at the end of the movie? When and obviously, speaking of Freudian type stuff, the father, the idea is the father castrates the not literally, of course, but figuratively castrates the son. The son realizes the father, according to Freudian psychology, the
Yeah.
father has this power, and then later the son decides, well, I'll just adopt that power, and then find another. They give up the mother, of course, as their love object, and they'll
Hmm.
find it. And then Freud says we live happily ever after all after all that. But
Yeah.
what do you think happened? And so at the end of the film, then he's with Vanessa Redgrave, and you can see maybe that this is a journey where there's going to be some healing on Holmes's part.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Is there a book that covers what happens? Or, like, is there a book that where we see Holmes that he's had this journey with a woman and then he's coming back to being a
No.
detective, or is that just nah? Okay,
No. No. They go back to the procedural stuff. I mean, it was this is a bit of fantasy when Freud never did hypnotism, especially not with a swinging watch kind of thing. Um, he actually used cocaine himself, which would have not made him averse to Holmes doing it. This was a matter of some importance in a later century, not this one. And then also they make the mention of ego, which Freud did come up with, but not until the 1900s. So
that's that's interesting. Yeah, that's another thing's brilliant about this movie is it's Freud. You can tell he's learning all the things he needs to learn in the future. It's a young Freud,
yeah,
and so he's going to build on some of these things. That do they mention ego in the film? I'm trying to think if they're
they do. Yeah,
yeah, and so that's going to come later.
it's when they first encounter Freud and they talk about it's not Freud that talks about ego, it's Watson. So I mean, it's a
There you
theory that
go.
Freud has yet to come up with. Maybe he learned it from Watson. Who knows?
One thing, and I know we still need to talk about music casting even more there, but one thing while we're still on Freud, the number of symbols. Well, you mentioned the dreams. that and apparently dreams are part of in the
Oh yeah.
books we actually get a lot of Holmesian dreams. There's that you're that's
Well,
kind of
yeah.
a
There's the snake is from the Speckled Band, the that I recall, and let's see what else do they have. They had references to Hound of the Baskervilles. Of course, Toby, which was
ah
they used in several stories, who had a particularly sensitive nose that they would borrow him from time to time, and yeah, many others I probably missed.
some of the phallic symbols that connected to Freud that they mentioned, which ties into dreams, snakes, tunnels, swords. These are all kind of tennis, even tennis racket. Of course, sometimes, as Freud said, a cigar is just a cigar. They're not
Yeah,
all they're not all phallic
it's
symbols.
true.
But so you can read it. But yeah, the snakes connected to films, and the other thing, the floating bed. Now, in Freudian psychology, when we fly in our dreams, he says that's an erotic kind of a dream. That's a dream. Uh,
Have you ever flown in your dreams?
yeah, I have flown in my dreams.
Really? I
I
never have
have.
it. I remember one time when I go over the cliff in a convertible, and I don't know if they could call that flying because the car falls faster than I do. So I think it's
We're
maybe
falling with
falling,
style.
or maybe without style in the case of that. But
We had a convertible.
I've never actually flown in a dream, and they say it's something special about that.
Well, for me, I have to have something It's been a long time, but they're so memorable. I always have to. It's like I'm flying a balsa wood plane, and
Wait a
all of
minute,
a sudden I
you don't
just
want to reveal anything that might get you in legal trouble now.
no, no. It's no, but there's always got to be some reason to fly. And in my dreams, I'm holding on to. Thank goodness I'm fully clothed, but I'm holding on to a piece of balsa wood, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. The wind catches the balsa wood, and I can fly.
That's
And
interesting.
yeah, but I can't just fly. It's like the flying nun. I've got to have something,
Right.
some lifting presence.
Yes. Maybe we need to do a Sally Field film after this.
And Sally Field was going to be that was our last film. We were looking at Sally Field playing the part of in the uh, where we're talking
Well, she was of course in Forrest Gump, but she was also in Norma Ray, which was kind of her dramatic film debut. She was in Smokey and the Bandit, where she plays Burt Reynolds' girlfriend, which was not acting; they actually were. And
I think they considered her for Time After Time, though. Is something you she
oh yeah,
was
they wanted her. They wanted her in the place of Mary Steenburgen. Yeah,
right.
but
Thank
she was
goodness.
too busy making Smokey and the Bandit and
Yeah,
marrying Burt Reynolds.
it makes sense. And it's good she didn't have a nun's habit. She could have flown out of it anyway.
No,
Flown
I
out
tell
of
you that
that Pontiac.
the first season of The Flying Nun, she was pregnant. So
Wow.
yes,
I did not know that.
yeah, and they were very careful not to let anybody know that.
That's amazing. Well, the well, speaking of casting,
See, this is why I podcast. I'm full of useless information. There is no way that is of use to anybody knowing.
but hopefully we're keeping somebody awake on a long commute. um,
or putting someone to sleep on a
to
sleepless
sleep,
night.
yeah, that's true. They could. um, so anybody else? Anything else with casting that we left out? That we got
Oh,
Robert Duvall, we got Alan Arkin, fantastic. I don't know if they considered anybody
Joel
else.
Gray. And
Oh
there's a
yes.
story there somewhere, and I cannot remember it now, as to why Joel Gray was Lowenstein was in the book, but
Oh,
Joel Gray and Meyer were friends, and I think that he was probably a uh, uh, had roomed with Robert Duvall at one time. I think that's what it is,
ah,
and so he
that's
got this
right.
part in the film just because he wanted to put Joel Gray in it.
Another roommate connection, just like Watson and Holmes.
Yeah.
That's, and of course Joel Grey, famously in Cabaret,
Yes.
and of course he really doesn't have that much of a pockmarked face, but that they
No.
made, they
Makeup
bring
does
that
wonderful
up,
things, doesn't it?
right, and then the other Grey is from James Bond, and that would be Charles Grey, who played Blofeld, and also and I forgot, I realized that he had played
He
an
also
agent.
he
Yeah.
also played Mycroft in the BBC Holmes series,
Ah,
where Jeremy Brett was Holmes. Charles Gray was Mycroft in that.
my goodness, that's I didn't realize that. He was
Yeah.
oh, he'd bring such a presence to anything he does. He was
Yeah.
fantastic.
And
And
let's
of
see.
course, wow, Vanessa Redgrave, who would later be in the first Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah.
Uh she was
And they don't show um, Mrs. Hudson at all, but that's kind of a shame. But
did, did they oh, gotcha, Mrs. Hudson.
yeah,
Okay, now you're gonna
it's
have to
funny. It's funny in the Mrs. Hudson was the landlady
ah,
on Baker Street,
on Baker,
and
right.
she is mentioned a lot. She has spoken very little, and she's just kind of there in most of the stories. And one of the things I really loved about Sherlock, which was the one with Benedict Cumberbatch, was
Ah,
that anytime that they featured Mrs. Hudson, she would chide Watson as to why he never put more of what she said into his stories.
that's awesome. That no that and where would be if you wanted to if you wanted to get in, certainly you could read the books easily, a place to do a deep dive. If you wanted to follow up this movie with more Sherlock Holmes, where would you start? What are some of the things that you've enjoyed that
I think that before anybody reads anything by Holmes, you should read A Study in Scarlet, because it gives the origin story there, and that stuff is a free download. If you
ah
have any kind of computer or reader or anything like that, I believe that both um, Barnes and Noble and Amazon both have free copies of A Study in Scarlet. It's out of copy right now, so it's easily found, and it's a good read, and it gives you everything you need to know about all the characters, and then the other stories are more enjoyable because you have the backstory.
oh, that's, so much of the great stuff you can get on a free download, whereas you have to pay for Harold Robbins probably still. So
Yeah, there's no justice, is there?
no. That's yeah. Was there one more casting thing? There's one in the back of my mind. I'm trying to think. Oh, this is one thing I had read, and I'd read it in an interview with. I think I'd read it Nicholas Meyer too. They had thought about using, uh, yeah, Nigel Bruce, uh, as a kind of Colonel Blimp type character, which would, the old Colonel Blimp film.
I hadn't heard that, but it's an interesting idea because he, of course, is what everybody thinks of as Watson. He played Watson in all of the Basil Rathbone Holmes
That's right.
pictures, which were done during the 40s, and most of those, interestingly, were transposed into the 1940s, and so Holmes and Watson didn't exist in the late 19th century, but in the early mid 20th
Oh, they
century.
try into the
And
exactly.
so and that characterization, Nigel Bruce's characterization of Watson, kind of stuck to a whole lot of other treatments. But what's interesting is Nigel Bruce was a voice actor as well. He was on radio, did various characters on radio, and during World War II, there was I used to mention this in my class. During World War II, there was some concern of when Hitler would make a speech. If it was a live speech on the radio, they would know where the studios were and could bomb the studios.
Ah,
And that's why that Germany had developed the tape recorder, what we call now a tape recorder. And they would tape record Hitler's speeches and then play back the tape when Hitler was back in his bunker. So in case they bombed the studios at whatever the Berlin radio was, he would be safe. And they did the same thing in England, except they didn't have tape, and transcription discs are too obviously recorded. And so when they needed Churchill to speak, they used Nigel Bruce, who did a very believable Churchill impression. And so Churchill's speeches were read live on the radio by Nigel Bruce at the BBC. So if you listen to a historical recording of Churchill during the war, you're most likely hearing Nigel Bruce and not Churchill.
That is fascinating, right? And you're most likely hearing Nigel Bruce instead of, and that, which reminds me, I'm just double checking. That had to be, well, yeah, that had to be Colonel Blimp. I looked at Nigel Bruce, and he's got a long section of, or what, I'm not sure if he did play Colonel Blimp in the Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. But they were thinking of Nigel Bruce doing a Colonel Blimp-like presentation. But yeah, he was Churchill. Yeah, Churchill's. And the other thing I meant to mention, we were talking about how people being read to and narration, and that I enjoy narration too. And you can't be a radio guy unless you like being, unless you've got to be able to, as a radio guy, you've got to enjoy being read to. I'll just put it that way.
There's a certain amount of that, yes.
And you are a radio person, and I'm a film person who loves radio. So you can, I never have trouble with narration at all in a film. And I really liked it in this film. It was a
fun film. It had nice action sequences in it, even if they don't fall into strictly a Sherlock Holmes story. But I enjoyed the. They said, this is the local, and they said, well, it's now the Orient Express. With Watson pointing his gun to the engineer, and then they're having to take away the wood from the caboose in order to fuel the train in order to catch up to
the other train.
And so it was good, action filled, and I like the ability that they showed Watson to be much more agile than he'd been seen in other films. So it was an enjoyable thing, and a great cast, and of course the writing was brilliant, and like I say, there's some things that would not really fit in with Holmes canon, but it was certainly enjoyable, and so I've always liked this film.
And Nigel Bruce looks. It's funny. I was just thinking about Nigel Bruce and Colonel Blimp. He looks like Colonel Blimp, who's actually in the Arrow, the Archers film, Michael Powell's film. That's Roger Livesley that plays Colonel Blimp, but I can see Nigel Bruce kind of channeling that.
Oh, we did not mention that Orson Welles was first thought of to play Mycroft, and
yes.
And you wouldn't think from this film that would be the thing, because you were saying before we started here that it didn't seem all that earth-shattering for him to get up out of his chair at the club. And in fact, the character of Mycroft never left his club. He was certainly probably more intelligent than Sherlock was, but he spent all his time in the club and rarely moved from there, despite the fact that he was tied in with a lot of the British government.
And that's why I love that.
People would come to him. People would come to him, and so Orson Welles would have been perfectly cast for this, because you could believe him as somebody who would tell other people what to do and make them come to him.
Right. Oh, 100%. And if Orson Welles is actually going to get up, when are we leaving? Now. then something momentous has happened. Yeah.
Yes.
And then they get that London taxi, which was so fascinating. The way they filmed it, the guy's sitting up on top of the, it's a horse-drawn taxi.
It's a hansom cab, yeah.
Yeah, right, handsome. And so he's sitting up on top, and then they're right on street level, and they just pop out the front. I was not familiar with the design of that cab that much.
Yeah, and they had mentioned in the books and stories of different kinds. The hansom cab was the one that they enjoyed most, but sometimes they would be on what they'd call a dog trap, which sounded like something that was more like the back of a truck. I'm not sure, but they mentioned that's another part of Conan Doyle's world building in those
Wow.
stories.
Just yeah, it's just fantastic. And yeah, what's fascinating is so much of this what we still use the term, of course, world building, and it goes back to Arthur Conan Doyle and fan fiction and the fans demanding you can't kill this character and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it all is still happening now and
Just at
uh
the speed of light now.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. But that's just a wonderful film and just a great. It's interesting that this fan fiction in fitting in between stories in the way it probably does is really serves as a great introduction to the character, and it just makes you want to learn more
Yeah.
about. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would recommend if I could find a copy of my own, is the annotated Sherlock Holmes. I checked it out from a library at one time, and it was just full of information, cross-referencing stories and certain fan theories and headcanon and such as this. It was all written in this book. It was a huge volume, and I've not seen it since, but that would be something.
Ah,
But there, like I say, there are a number of free things that are available online, and I recommend them to you. But
and
also
I guess
recommend the film if you can find it. Right now, I think it's only a rental on Amazon, but
right.
if it comes up free, and I don't know why you have to pay to see that. I don't know why, but same reason you have to pay for Harold Robbins books, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we have beaten this horse. So would we're gonna take a week away, and you have some grading to do. I understand,
Right.
and I'm going to be in and out. So we will come back in 2 weeks, and we'll let you know before we get there of what film we're going to talk about then. But
And one more one if you haven't watched this film yet, one more if you never see a horse, not often you see a Lippers horse used as a murder weapon.
that's true.
Speaking of dead horses, that's yeah, that's
They still exist. They're actually Lippers horses. They're very smart horses, and they're show horses. And
right.
that so it was a nice thing to feature them. I and a pretty good scene there that
Yeah.
puts a little suspense into the movie. But anyway, thank you for joining us. We enjoyed doing this. We hope you enjoyed watching it, and hope you'll join us in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, I will be back next week. We'll talk about another episode of Farscape and me and Professor O in 2 weeks. So we hope that you'll find us and watch what we have to say. Thank you once again, and until next time, don't go far.